It was almost as if they were bowing to international pressure to do this.
Yeah, it's not just the United States. The entire G7 is now pressuring Israel essentially to end the war. Now, why do they do that? Is it that they want Hamas to remain in power? They most certainly do not, any more than I think the population of Gaza wants Hamas to remain in power. It is the length of the war that is creating discomfort all over the world, and that is the ugliness of the war that the U.S.
But war is ugly.
And indeed, the U.S. probably knows that they also killed 10,000 civilians in Mosul, but that was somewhat more distant from the West than Gaza is. And look, if it's going to be ugly, they wanted it to be short. The combination of long and ugly was not working for the world, clearly, and I don't think it's a gift to the U.S. because the population of Israel is not happy, not really, with the degree of success that they have been able to show versus the cost of the war in terms of losses of life in the army, putting aside the Palestinian losses, the embarrassment to Israel, and the tremendous antipathy it's kicked up around the world to Israel because of the damage on the Palestinian side, and the fact that the hostages, it's now about 100 days, are still being held. The only hostages that have come back have been dead other than one. And it's not a good look for Israel, so something had to change. And from the beginning, they had known that eventually they would enter a stage where it is less intensive. But I think there's also a diplomatic aspect to it.
Yeah, but the idea of the timeline it being right now, it seems as though what the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian protesters you'll see all across New York, London, and the Central look at this as a victory. We pressured Israel to pull back.
It might, perhaps. But at least on the ground, the people of Gaza perhaps will suffer less. It means a long war, because the goal of removing Hamas, I don't think has changed. As I say, I don't think the West would like it to change. But it means, as the Chief of Staff said, probably the entirety of 2024 will be a lower intensity war, which brings with it political questions in Israel.
Because Israel didn't want to have a war this long. I mean, look what happened in Lebanon back in 2006.
For a whole bunch of reasons, including the economy cannot really sustain this level of mobilization of so many workers. But also the price Israel pays on the global stage. On the other hand, if there's no longer this intensive a war in Gaza, it becomes more plausible for the IDF to take care of Hezbollah in the north. Because a two-front war obviously is far more difficult to prosecute. If the Gaza front goes to a lower ebb, then that perhaps also is a message to Hezbollah. I do assess that in the north as well, Israel would like to proceed diplomatically. I'm a little surprised that they're not doing more in the realm of public diplomacy, because Israel's case with Hezbollah is rock solid. They should be doing everything possible to whip up the largest pressure that can be whipped up, both politically and diplomatically and economically, on everyone that has leverage in Lebanon to get Hezbollah to pull back north of the Litani.
So, Dan, while we're talking about diplomatically, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is landing right now in Saudi Arabia. He's going to meet with Mohammed bin Salman. What's the expectation for him to be doing there?
He would like, his stated goal is to avoid escalation, and a special escalation that could draw the U.S. in to various forms of warfare, direct or indirect, with Iran. But I think he's also trying to pull together the day after coalition of Arab countries, which, along with other countries, perhaps also the U.S., would help fund the reconstruction in Gaza and also perhaps help secure Gaza. And for that, he needs Israel to provide a day after vision that is something other than never-ending destruction and Israeli occupation, and that the government of Israel, in its current constitution, cannot possibly do, because the far right on which Netanyahu depends would veto it. So we have a square peg in a round hole right now, and Israel's position is not helping America pull together the coalition that is undoubtedly Blinken's aspiration.
Another subject that's going to be in the news in the next few days is Israel appearing in front of the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. Can you walk us through what our viewers need to, how will this work? Walk us through the mechanics.
South Africa will present its case against Israel on Thursday, and Israel will defend its case on Friday, and at some point there will be a ruling. But what viewers really should know is that there are different versions of The Hague. Israelis just speak of The Hague. Many people in the world speak of The Hague. The International Court of Justice is an arm of the UN, essentially, that is rather political and that has absolutely no enforcement powers. As an example, the ICJ ordered Azerbaijan to end its blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh last February, 2 months into it. Azerbaijan ignored it. And this ended in a massive ethnic cleansing, essentially, the flight of the population, 120,000 people. Azerbaijan paid no price for this whatsoever because there's no political will. The only enforcement mechanism of rulings of the ICJ, even if they should rule against Israel, which I rather doubt, actually, because the case for genocide is weak, in my view, non-existent, because there's no intent, would be through the UN Security Council. Now, the Security Council can impose economic sanctions, can even take military action or authorize military action. But of course, the UN Security Council, A, can do that without a ruling from the ICJ, and B, won't do it because of the U.S. veto, as long as Israel doesn't offend the U.S. too much by ignoring its requests for revision for the day after. So this is very, very, very different from the International Criminal Court, which is also in The Hague, and which has the powers of issuing arrest warrants.
Which they did for Vladimir Putin last
Indeed.
year.
Well, of course, for that, Putin has to leave the country and arrive into an ICC signatory country. But essentially, the ICJ is a political body. I don't mean to disrespect it too much, but it is political. The judges are from various countries. They historically almost never stray from the political position of the respective country. And so it's a bit of a circus, but will it do Israel any PR favors?
That's the question.
No, it won't.
Why?
Well,
You would think that social media would love to...
Because the destruction in Gaza is very great. And you said before, war is always ugly. Sure. And urban warfare is even uglier. For that to be okay in the realm of public opinion, you have to present a case for an endgame that is amenable to a broad swath of the global population. Israel, other than removing Hamas, I hate to say it, has not.
Dan Perry, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming in and talking to us.